Iran is supporting Russia in Ukraine, and it's supporting Hamas and other terrorist groups in the region.
So here the president's making a very interesting point, and it's an accurate point. Iran does in fact support Russia's conflict against Ukraine, and Iran does support both Hezbollah and Hamas in the Middle East. Iran's primary conflict point isn't actually the United States, however. Their primary conflict point is in fact a battle for dominance in the Middle East against Saudi Arabia. And there's a long history of conflict and aggression between the two countries, even though they have reached a place of relative diplomatic peace in the last few years, largely orchestrated by China. What is not being said here is that Iran's interests in the Middle East and Iran's interests in Israel specifically have to do with Iran. They don't have to do with a weakening of the United States. They don't have to do with a weakening of Israel. They have to do very much with a strengthening of support for what's known as the Shia Crescent, or the increasing sphere of influence for Iran in the Middle East. There's also an important relationship here between Iran and Russia, and as well between Russia and Israel, because Netanyahu and Putin are actually close advisors and friends. They have a long, close relationship expanding almost 2 decades. So Putin understands Netanyahu very well, and the same kind of relationship exists between Russia and Iran. So you have 3 countries here who are in communication with each other, and that contributes to this conflict, because Putin is in a perfect position to be able to predict how Netanyahu will respond to any kind of aggression that's coming from Hamas. And Iran has the ability to essentially turn up or turn down the volume on Hamas's attacks. So what you see here is a situation in which Israel very well could be played by Iran, because Putin is able to translate exactly what Iran might do and predict Netanyahu's response in Israel. And that creates kind of a tinderbox that is under the control of an alliance that exists between Iran and Russia. Now, there's a third important part to the alliance between Iran and Russia, and that is China. Because China, Iran, and Russia all recently became close allies when Iran joined the BRICS trading bloc, BRICS trading bloc, at the end of August 2023. So we have now a mutual economic connection, a partnership, as well as a military partnership that exists and is demonstrated between Iran, Russia, and China, which is the new kind of counterbalance. That is the economic trading force that is trying to attract the developing world in competition with the G7 or Western allies. So what we really see here is a conflict of interests, a conflict for global influence to define the next generation of superpower. This is why we are truly at an inflection point in history, because we have a group of countries in the developing world who are standing opposite to the existing power base that is the G7 countries and the Western allies. And the rest of the world has to decide which one they're going to allow to influence their policy more. And in that conflict, what we really have is an economic conflict, not a military conflict, which is why you see conflict in Europe and conflict in the Middle East, but you don't see anyone attacking the United States. You don't see any military targeting. You don't see any active targeting of American citizens or U.S. targets, because the Eastern powers, China, Russia, and Iran, have all learned that they can execute their policy objectives and their power-based objectives much more effectively through proxy conflicts, like what we're seeing in Israel, what we saw in Syria, what we're seeing in Ukraine. They're able to support their ambitions by making the United States simply look weak and non-committal, rather than making the United States the center of any kind of actual physical attack. This is very similar to what you see in a playground or in a schoolyard, when a group of smaller, weaker kids all band together to fight against a bully or a group of bullies. That's exactly what we're seeing here. The 10,000-pound gorilla in the world is the United States, specifically because of the United States economy. So when you see the smaller economies of the world all band together, their goal is to create a partnership or an alliance that actually can compete against the GDP developed by the United States. Because more GDP brings more wealth creates better militaries, better military weaponry, and a stronger economic future. The possibility of future dominance over the Western powers. This is not a military conflict that the United States is at risk of losing or feeling. This is very much a proxy conflict that exists because of Iran and Russia working together to try to gain influence in the East. If you like this short clip, make sure you click here to see the next clip, or here to see the full podcast episode.